Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 39. Well, that was a waste of time. Ella sighed as she finished writing her report. There wasn't an office set up for her to use yet, which meant she was using the desk in Iing's room. It did have the added bonus of a sexy guy laying across the small bed, watching her. By the time Ella made it to the observatory, it was already evening. They did a preliminary interrogation, then the intelligence officer took the prisoner back to base for a more thorough questioning. The human didn't have anything interesting to say. He claimed he was just out for a walk in the freezing snow. While wearing thermal gear to make himself look like a 500-kilogram moose. He was carrying a bunch of human-made surveillance gear, which he claimed was for bird watching. Ella would get a report once he was properly questioned, but who knew how long that would take? She was still waiting for a report on the survivors of the assault. Now it was getting late and Ella had no idea how the living situation even worked here. So, where do you usually sleep? Iing smirked. We've been sleeping in a big pile in Sam and Sam's room. They have a huge mattress on the floor. Just one big snuggly family. Oh. Ella wasn't sure she was ready for that. She didn't even really know the other three members of her strange new family. Mind if I sleep in here? That depends. Iing had a devious smile. Mind if I join you? I don't know, that bed looks pretty small. In reality, it was no smaller than what they had shared with Stace, but damn it, she was going to flirt with her boyfriend. Do you think you'll be able to fit? I'm sure I can manage to squeeze in. Iing winked and they both cracked up, laughing as Ella made her way towards the bed. She got about halfway there before a noise from across the hallway distracted her. Vengeance is mine! Sammy shouted. It was followed almost immediately by the unmistakable sound of Marin squealing out in climax, the sound trailing out into a low whimpering moan, then silence. Can you shut the door first? That might get distracting. Askel let out a tiny whimper as he tried to roll out of bed. His mornings usually weren't that bad, but he had been stiff from all the travel and, once the approval paperwork was done, he had spent the rest of his time running around the hospital, trying to catch up with Stace's doctors and nurses. He had been looking to arrange for a therapist to come and talk to Stace about his eye, but since he didn't know the building's layout or who he exactly needed to talk to, it had just been a nightmare. Eventually, he managed to chat up Joe, and a little bit of good-natured flirting got him the help he needed. He wasn't exactly good at flirting with girls, or in general, but she seemed to appreciate that he was putting in the effort. Once Stace was out for the night, completely worn out from the day's events, things had gotten even worse. Askel had made it about 5 steps outside before he lost traction in the powdery snow and landed hard on his shoulder. Careful steps had gotten him to the hotel's shuttle, but he lost his footing again in the slush as soon as he stepped out. By the time he made it to his room, he was soaking wet, freezing, and miserable. It was getting hard for him to focus, almost like he was drunk. Askel had just had enough energy to turn the shower on as hot as it would go and stumble into it fully clothed. That, of course, meant he had to do laundry because his only pair of jeans were muddy and wet. Now it was morning, he was still exhausted, and every muscle ached. So much for a bright new day on his new home planet. After throwing on some of Jessica's old clothes, Askel made it out to the lobby. Some breakfast and some painkillers would hopefully do him good. Askel. He turned to see that same Jessica waving at him from the front desk. I have something for you. I can't take anything else from you, you've done too much for me already. Askel put on a tired smile and joined her. No, you got a package. She reached down and pulled up a large, heavy cardboard box, plopping it onto the counter. "Thumbprint here please." "Thanks." Askell numbly pressed his thumb to the pad and took the box back to his room. He really didn't have the energy for more surprises. Once he had the box sitting on his room's small desk, Askell split the tape with a pointed thumbnail and flipped the cardboard flaps open. The inside was wrapped in tissue paper, with a small printed card sitting on top. "Askell, welcome to Earth. We look forward to working with you. Stay safe and remember, you have the right to be happy. Hope these fit. Stace and Ella." Peeling the paper back, Askell reached in and pulled out a jacket made of black leather. It had hard composite scales on the forearms, elbows, across the shoulders, and down the spine. It looked like some sort of armor. He pulled it on and looked at himself in the mirror. It was a perfect fit and looked great, though it was definitely thinner than the winter coat Jessica had donated. Perhaps it was for when the weather warmed up a bit. As Askell went to pull the jacket off, he felt something in the pocket. Reaching in, there was a little box that felt like it was attached to the inside somehow. His thumb felt a switch and, without thinking, he flipped it. Oh! Oh yes! The entire jacket heated up in an instant, and the Helcom quickly found a control wheel on the box that adjusted the temperature. Blessed, wonderful warmth. Turning it back off for now, he practically danced back to the box and looked in it. There were leather slacks as well, made to fit over his clothes. The armor scales covered the knees, thighs, and shins, and the leather was thicker and layered on the seat. He took a moment to admire his ass. It looked like he actually had one, thanks to the padding, then reached into a pocket. Another box with another switch awaited his eager fingers. MMMMHMMM. That was, wow. He quickly turned the heat off, then checked the magical, wonderful box again. There were some charges for his new gear as well as a pair of chunky boots. Heated boots. Askell pulled them on and looked at himself. He would have to ask Stace how he had gotten the Helcom's measurements, but it didn't matter. He looked great. Like a sexy badass commando. Askell reached into his pants pocket again and turned on the heater. It was. He checked the clock. Askell didn't have a formal schedule, and he could probably spare a half hour or so. He put on some headphones, got some music playing, cranked all the heaters up to high, and laid down on the bed, letting his hands roam. This was going to be a good day after all. Stace was starting to get a hang of this whole Omnipod thing. Each flick of his finger changed the image, scrolling through various options with their costs listed in Imperial credits. He tried to look at each model objectively, like he was looking at buying a used car. If he focused on that, it would take some of the horror out of it. He was looking at replacement legs. The therapy session in the morning had gone kind of okay, and one of the tubes going into the port implanted in Stace's side under his right nipple was flooding his tissues with anti-anxiety medication, but he still flinched every time he caught a reflection of himself in the Omnipod's glossy screen. If Askell or any of the other nurses caught him, Stace was sure he'd be getting in trouble, but damn it, he needed to be doing something. If Stace was going to be able to do more than just sit and stare at a security camera, he needed to be mobile. That meant new legs, which meant thinking about. No. He would do it. He had to. There was too much to do. And what are you up to? Stace flushed as he looked up to see Joey standing at the door. She looked pissed. There was no way for her to see his Omnipod from there, but he still panicked and tried to turn it off. His right arm jerked with a spasm and the device clattered to the floor. Shit. Joey picked up his pad, looked at it, then locked eyes with Stace. He managed almost a second of eye contact before he had to look away. Those black, inky eyes were like dark holes. He felt his stomach clench. He was falling, the world dropping out from under him. Stace tried to turn away as he heaved, but all that he accomplished was dirtying himself and his bed with his sick. His chest was tight, and it felt like he couldn't breathe. A small, detached part of his mind noted that he was hyperventilating. Joey ran up to the console next to Stace's bed and started punching at the touch screen with a finger. A warm sensation filled him, starting at the port in his side and flowing outward. Slowly, his breath evened out and he leaned back, eyes half-lidded. When your heart rate monitor went crazy, I hoped you were just looking at porn. Joey's voice was small and far away. She said something else, but it was getting fuzzy. The world faded out for what might have been a second or perhaps a year, and when it came back everything had a certain wobbliness to it. Were you this morning? I told you he was prone to doing dumb shit and injuring himself. I'm sorry. I haven't set my schedule yet, and I figured he would be sleeping in. Well, here's your problem now. Joey sounded angry. Check out his brain scan, he was basically doing whatever the anxiety version of masturbating is. I just want to be better. Askel and Joey turned to look at Stace, and both looked upset. That's not the way to do it. Joey leaned over and patted Stace's head, hand staying there to play with his hair. You need to take it easy. No stress. Just take your time. I am sorry, Askel repeated. The other nurse just sighed. Yeah, it's okay. Nobody can be here all the time and I'm sure this little guy was just waiting for his chance. Joey's hand tightened slightly and, his brain still fuzzy with whatever they had just flooded his system with, Stace couldn't help it. He moaned. Joey pulled her hand back like she had just been caught stealing, eyes widening. Askel let out a tiny snort of amusement. I should go. She made a hasty retreat and soon Stace was alone with his nurse. Everything felt like it was floating. Bye, he called out as she went through the door. He waved, only to realize belatedly that he hadn't actually moved his arms. Did he even say anything? Okay, let's get you cleaned up. A motor hummed under Stace and suddenly he was sitting upright as the bed folded forward. Askel closed the door and carefully peeled off Stace's gown. Everything slowly started to come into focus again as Askel gently wiped him with a moist towel. Goddess below, you really made a mess. Sure. Askel looked at him. Stace tried to put his words together, but his tongue felt thick in his mouth. I want a shower. Stace, you need to speak chill. Oh yeah. Shower. I'll make a deal with you, you sit still and let me finish cleaning you up, and once you're sober again I'll talk to the doctor and see if we can unhook you long enough for a good scrub. Sound good? Okay. The towel was warm and soothing, and when Askel leaned him forward to wipe down his back Stace found himself draped on the other man's shoulder. He was completely limp. Whatever they had given Stace had taken what little strength he had. You're cold. Yes, Stace. What did you call me? An ectotherm? Smell good? Thank you, Stace. When you're not doped up to your eyeballs I'll tell you said that. Then you can be as embarrassed as I am. Okay. Sammy needed a logistics person. When it was just them and Sam, it was easy. Now there were 24 commandos, their commanding officer, Elora, Marion, and Iing added to the mix, and thanks to the deal with House Chelza, Sammy was technically in charge. All these people needed to be fed and seen to, and there was a lot of work to do getting the observatory properly fortified. This was not in Sammy's wheelhouse. They turned away from the budget spreadsheets. Sammy needed a drink, a snack, and maybe another round ruining Marion. Unfortunately, the snacks had all been eaten, the booze was dried up, And Marion could barely walk this morning, so she had thrown in the towel. Maybe Samuel would be free later. Or they could see if Elora was game. What is it? Marion was never far from the little physicist these days. She leaned over their shoulder and took a look. I can't make heads or tails of this. My head isn't built for money. Have you tried asking Ian for help? Sammy thought about it. Do you think he would be up for it? I really don't know him too well yet. He has a degree in mathematics and was planning to manage our household. It's a very masculine thing to do. That earned Marion a raised eyebrow. What? Validity of gender roles aside, I'll ask him. We have a lot of work and I can't be worrying about this. There is physics to do, mirrors to coat, and a family to protect. Speak of the cutie. Marion pointed as Ian came into the room. Ian, can you? Sammy, can I? The two stopped and stared at each other. You first. They stopped again. How about Sammy goes first? Marion interjected, breaking the bizarre stalemate. Ian, can you help me with the budgeting and ordering supplies for this place? If I spend all my time doing it, I won't be able to get any science done. Sure, whatever, just send it to my pad. He sounded distracted. Can I borrow your car? Do you know how to drive it? Ian stood there, looking awkward. How hard can it be? Why do you need it? Sammy kicked themselves mentally while Marion asked the obvious question. Elora can't leave and I need to go slap Stace upside the head. He's been trying to rush his medical care and keeps making things worse. His new nurse called and tattled on him. There was an idea. It's almost a 7-hour drive to Denver from here. I'll make a deal with you, you can borrow the bus, but only if Sam drives so you can work on budget stuff on the road. And you have to pick up supplies on the way back. And you're going armed. Marion's words had the air of finality. I would rather have to explain why you didn't have a permit than have to tell your parents you died. Again? Sammy opened the drawer on their desk and pulled out a pistol. They dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed it to Ian along with the magazine. This one will be easier to stuff in a pocket. Dress warm and let Elora know where you're going. In the end, Elora sent 2 members of Delec's commando team along for the ride, bodyguards for the 2 males. She also called into the base. When the adventuring party got back, the little bus would hopefully be packed with everything from snack food to hand grenades. So what happened, exactly? Elora's face on the omnipod seemed full of anger, only tempered with concern. Askel couldn't blame her. I was looking at it. He was giving himself a panic attack by looking at prosthetics on his omnipod. Askel was angry, but he had to be professional. Why would his patient be so stupid? He did a really good job of it too. Almost turned into a cardiac event. Really? The anger dropped from Elora's voice. Now that concern was tempered with panic. I need to walk. So I can help. No, Stace. You need to be lying in bed while we rebuild strength in your heart and finish killing the tumor on your liver. Askel sighed. Do you think all we were doing was making you wait for new legs? Almost every organ in your body has trauma. It's going to be weeks, maybe months before we even think about doing the sort of surgery you need to get cybernetics. You trying to help almost killed you. Again? Askel turned to the pad to see Elora's face. She looked so sad. I am really starting to think there's something wrong with you, Stace. It seems like every chance you get you try to kill yourself. Suicide risk. If Stace was really that sort of patient, Askel needed to know. No, I hate being useless. Hate not being able to fix myself. The human's eyes, one hazel and one black, were filling with tears. Everything I try just makes it more bad. I was going to keep it a surprise, but Ian is on his way. Samuel, too. Hopefully they can slap some sense into you. Seriously, Stace. You need to take it easy. Ella thought about it. A skill, take his omnipod. He can have it back when he behaves. You can't. I can. I own it, remember. Ella switched back to talking to the small Helcom. Use your judgment. Sorry you have to baby him like this. Hopefully he'll actually listen to you. It's alright, part of the job. I just figured a guy old enough to be my dad would be a little more mature than this. In reality, Askel could see where Stace was coming from. From what little he knew of the man, he had been fiercely independent once. Losing that had to hurt at least as badly as his incredibly long list of injuries. Stace's face was red and his eyes downcast. I am sorry. I don't mean to cause everyone trouble. I know. Love you. Love you too, Ella. Sorry. The omnipod went dark with a chirp and Askel slipped it into a drawer on the other side of the room. He was polite enough to let Stace cry on his own, let the broken man put himself back together. It didn't take long. I didn't get a chance to thank you for the present. Askel returned to Stace and offered him a tissue. The human wiped his face, losing some of his visible anguish in the process. I didn't want you to be cold. Jessica, the concierge at the hotel, nearly threw a fit when she saw my outfit. I guess someone in her family rides a motorcycle so she recognized it. Stace, how much money did you spend on me? The gift was impressive. Jessica had been agape, actually shocked that his patient would drop at least 1,000 credits on someone on the drop of a hat. That was her estimate, at least. Askel didn't want to feel indebted to Stace any more than he did already. Doesn't matter. It's just money. You need to stay warm. Askel plopped down onto the chair next to Stace's bed and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. I fell, you know. Stace turned to look at him and did that weird human eyebrow raise thing. Yesterday, on my way back to the hotel, I fell twice in the snow. It was awful. I ended up so wet and cold I could barely function. Then this morning I fell again, but since I was wearing that armor coat it didn't hurt and I stayed warm. Is that why you picked it out? The human broke into an oddly shy grin and shook his head in the negative. I just thought it looked good. You have scales, so your coat should have scales. That forced a laugh out of Askel and another comfortable silence followed. Show me how you walk. What? You keep falling? Show me how you walk. Askel stood up and paced the room, feeling awkward. It only took a few steps for Stace to start nodding. You are going, shit, don't know the words. Back to front. When you walk on ice, need to put whole foot down. He used his hand to pantomime taking a step heel to toe, then one where he stepped flat. Like angry stepping but gentle. Angry stepping? Oh. Askel grabbed a piece of paper and wrote stomp. I will try that. Thank you, Stace. Now get some rest. He walked over to Stace's console and pushed a couple buttons. By the time he turned back to the human he was already asleep. Stace would stay that way until Askel or another nurse updated the console. It was for the best. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.